Ordination. Why and who? Well, my name is Shane Linder. I am a pastoral counselor. I'm going to talk a little bit about ordination. I'm not an expert. I don't know everything. I probably know a little bit more than the average person, so I'm just going to share what I know. The question here is, why get ordained? Why would somebody choose to get ordained? Well, the first, probably the most obvious and the most common reason is for church employment. An individual that decides to be a pastor or a rabbi or priest, they go through school, they go through seminary, and afterwards they get employed by a religious organization and eventually they become ordained. Normally, when they start working for the organization, they are not ordained, but they normally do a little internship and then eventually become ordained and stay in employment in that organization. This is what most people think of when they think of an ordained minister. He's a church pastor, a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi. This is the common thought. However, there are also some other people that get ordained because they are looking for ministry access. Okay, those are people like chaplains. Okay, a chaplain is a member of the clergy that works with people that are in hospitals or they're in prisons. Sometimes they're military chaplains. And these chaplains need access that is only provided in some situations to members of the clergy. Some hospitals, not all of them, but some hospitals, they only allow family members to visit a patient or a member of the clergy. Same with in jails and prisons. Oftentimes the prisoner can only have visitors that are on his list of approved visitors, but a member of the clergy is allowed to go in there. And so becoming ordained allows an individual to have access to people in these situations where there's a specialized ministry. Now, they can get access. Some chaplains are not ordained, but they are certified or somehow recognized by a organized religion. And that is what chaplains are, is that they are accountable to a religious body. And that's what ordination is, in their case, is showing, is that they are accountable to a religious body. So they are not a church pastor. They don't pastor church. Although there are church pastors that become chaplains, and there's priests that become chaplains and rabbis, so forth. But you don't have to be a traditional church pastor or a Catholic priest to become a chaplain. You can go another route, although that does require a master's degree in either some type of theology or counseling to become a chaplain. But then they get ordained. So that's another reason that somebody would get ordained, is if they are in a chaplaincy situation. Okay, and then there's the legal ordainment. Well, if a person gets legally ordained, then they can perform weddings. And there's certain people that want to perform weddings, like a ship's captain, for example, may want to perform weddings, and he's not a pastor, he's not a priest, he's just the captain of a ship. But he might get a legal ordination. And then there are pastoral counselors, which is what I am. And that's why I'm ordained, or that's why I got ordained to begin with, was because in order to be a family counselor, many states, they require you either to get a license from the Department of Health or to be ordained as a pastor, where the person is accountable to a religious body. Okay, well, what is the difference between ordinations? Well, the first type of ordination I'll talk about is a denominational ordination. This is an ordination that a religious denomination like the Lutheran Church or the Catholic Church or the Seventh-day Adventist Church will do for their ministers, their pastors. And this is what takes the most effort, we'll say. Typically, the person has to have a master's degree before they're going to get ordained. Many churches will hire pastors with just a bachelor's degree, but then they do an internship, and during that internship, they would need to earn their master's degree during that internship before they're getting ordained. The a lot of churches only require 1 year internship if the person already has their master's degree. Exceptions to that is the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They require longer internships, sometimes up to 5 years of an internship after the master's degree. Even if the person has a master's degree, they have to do that internship. So the minister that gets ordained from a religious organization like the Lutheran Church or the Catholic Church or the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that is a very significant achievement and speaks much to his credibility. Okay, there are also ordinations that are given out by ministerial associations. Okay, so these are not religious denominations, but they're an association of various ministers. Well, these associations would include, like the pastoral counselor, like myself. They also include other people, chaplains could be, and oftentimes are ordained by ministerial associations, and some others that are involved in certain ministries, like a motorcycle ministry or a prison ministry, or sometimes they have cowboy ministries, even, different types of niche ministries, and somebody is the leader. Now, why would they need to get ordained? A lot of them wouldn't need to get ordained, only if they wanted to perform a wedding ceremony, which sometimes that's the case, like a gentleman that might lead a biker or motorcycle ministry. And some people that are in his group that go riding motorcycles with him decide to get married, and they want him to marry them. Well, then he would need to get ordained. And so for those types of ministries, about the only reason that they would need to get ordained would be because they want, or somebody is requesting, that they perform a wedding ceremony. For the pastoral counselor, such as myself, pastoral counselors need to be an accountable. They need to be recognized religious practitioners, is the legal term. Not necessarily ordained, although ordained takes fills the role. Basically they have to be accountable to a religious organization in the United States that organization needs to have 501c3 status with the IRS. Okay, so oftentimes chaplains get this type of ordination because they also have to be accountable to a religious organization. And so that is why pastoral counselors or chaplains are getting this type of ordination. If they do not have the denominational ordination, and many pastoral counselors do have the denominational ordination, and many chaplains do, but not all of them do. This ordination by a ministerial association is not as credible as a denominational ordination. Some ministerial associations require a 1-year internship. I know of one that requires a 2-year internship, where they actually have to work underneath or in cooperation with a ordained minister. But for the most part, they do not carry as much credibility, because the credibility comes from someplace else. Like myself being a pastoral counselor, I have a master's degree in pastoral counseling, and then I did a practicum with the National Christian Counseling Association. So my credibility to do the work of a pastoral counselor comes from my education and my practicum. It doesn't come from my ordination. What my ordination adds to is that it makes me accountable to a religious body. So there's some accountability there. If I were to, say, use my counseling practice to commit fraud and rob somebody, there's an organization where I could be held accountable. So that is what that ordination does. Then we have an online ordination. And online ordinations, most of them that are more credible, you might get ordained online, but then they have regional groups, and so then there'll be a laying hands on ceremony at some point within a year or two of getting ordained online. But there are online ordinations that have no accountability at all. There's never a hands-on laying. And the people that would get this type of ordination are like the ship's captain. Or there's some people that are not Christians, and they might have their own spiritual groups, like some type of Eastern religion or something like that, and so they couldn't join a ministerial religion or ministerial association because they're not Christians, but they want to be able to perform weddings, and they are a religious leader in their group, even if it's an Eastern meditation group or something of that nature. And so then they might get this type of online ordination. So that is basically why somebody might get ordained and the different types of ordaining that there are. For a regular church member that might be a deacon or he might be an elder, he's very active, he loves the Lord, he does Bible studies, he brings souls to Jesus, but he's not a church pastor, he's got a job. Maybe he's a school teacher or maybe he's a construction worker, but he's very involved in ministry. But he doesn't need to be ordained. He's not going to be performing wedding ceremonies, and he's not going to be held accountable by the state as far as a counselor. So there's no real need for them to get ordained, unless they're a pastoral counselor, or if they are a chaplain, or of course a minister for a religious denomination. Then of course there is significant reason to get ordained. But otherwise, the reasons for getting ordained really are not that significant. In my religious denomination, although I'm a pastoral counselor, I'm ordained legally. I can officiate a wedding. I wouldn't do that. I have a church membership, and if somebody comes to me and wants me to officiate their wedding for them, I would suggest they approach the pastor of my church and have that pastor officiate that for them. My ordination is simply because I do work both as a chaplain and as a pastoral counselor, and so it gives me a religious body that I am accountable to.